When a woman focuses on herself and stays silent, everything falls into place. There comes a moment in every woman's life when the noise becomes too loud, the expectations too heavy, and the pressure to please too exhausting. And in that moment, something inside her shifts. She doesn't scream, she doesn't explain, she simply gets quiet and begins to rise. This isn't just another motivational message, it's a call back to yourself. If you've ever felt overlooked, stretched thin, or lost in the noise of trying to be everything for everyone, then this message is for you. Because when a woman finally chooses herself, when she focuses inward and walks in silence, everything around her starts to change. Stay with me until the end, because these next few minutes might just realign your spirit, reignite your strength, and remind you of the power you've always carried within. Silence is not weakness, it is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. In a world that constantly pressures women to explain themselves, defend their choices, and justify their emotions, choosing silence is a radical act of power. It is not about giving up, it's about standing up for your peace in a way that doesn't require validation. When a woman learns to hold her tongue, not out of fear, but out of confidence, she unlocks a deeper level of personal mastery. So there comes a time when you realize that responding to every insult, explaining every boundary, and reacting to every trigger only drains your spirit. The people who misunderstand you are not entitled to your energy. They are not owed an explanation for why you choose peace over chaos. When you stay silent in the face of disrespect, you reclaim the power to decide what deserves your time, what deserves your voice, and what deserves your energy. Silence is not avoidance, it is a declaration, a statement that says, I don't need to argue with you to know who I am. A woman who is grounded doesn't flinch when the noise gets loud. She doesn't react to petty conversations, baseless accusations, or energy-draining drama. Because she knows her value doesn't rise or fall based on someone else's opinion. She understands that her silence speaks volumes. It says she refuses to let the world pull her into emotional warfare that compromises her peace. It says she has graduated from proving herself to people who never tried to understand her in the first place. Silence also sharpens your awareness. When you're not always talking, you start hearing the things that matter. You become more in tune with your thoughts, your emotions, your inner voice. You start noticing patterns, who respects you, who drains you, who truly values your presence. Silence gives you the space to observe, to discern, to heal. In stillness, you begin to recognize how much of your life you've spent trying to be heard by people who never really listened. This is why silence is not a retreat, it's a reset. It's the moment where you decide to stop engaging in cycles that steal your light. It's when you realize that some battles are beneath you, some conversations are not worth your voice, some situations don't require your reaction, and some healing is only possible when you stop speaking and start listening to God, to your spirit, to your future calling you forward. A woman who walks in silence is not lost, she is aligning. She is shedding the need to perform, to convince, to respond. She's building quietly, healing inwardly, growing intentionally. She's no longer playing to the crowd, she's playing for her peace. Her silence is not a void, it is power contained. And when it's time, she will speak, not to prove anything, but to walk fully in her purpose. Focus is a sacred force. When a woman turns her attention inward and starts investing in herself, her value doesn't just increase, it multiplies. The world has conditioned women to believe that they are only worthy when they're needed, when they're serving, when they're fixing everything around them. But the moment she redirects that energy toward her own growth, healing, and vision, everything changes. The version of herself she begins to uncover is far more powerful than the one who was always overextended for everyone else. Focusing on yourself isn't selfish, it's essential, because a woman who pours from an empty cup eventually breaks. And there's nothing noble about losing yourself in the name of being everything to everyone. When a woman says no more, and begins saying yes to her own life, she begins to cultivate the kind of value that doesn't need applause to be real. She starts setting boundaries, not to push people away, but to protect the woman she's becoming. Her time becomes more guarded, her space becomes sacred, her priorities become clear, and with every step she takes toward herself, her light grows stronger. The distractions start to fade. She no longer chases validation because she's too busy chasing purpose. She doesn't compete with anyone because she finally understands that her only competition is who she was yesterday. She doesn't overextend herself to stay relevant in people's lives because she's building a life that feels right for her. The peace that comes with this kind of focus is unmatched. She begins to move with intention, speak with clarity, and walk with a confidence that doesn't scream but speaks powerfully through presence. People will notice the shift. Some will misunderstand it. They'll say she's changed, and she has, but not for them, for her. Because the more she pours into her mind, her body, her spirit, the more she evolves into the woman she was always meant to be. She stops settling for crumbs in relationships because now she knows she deserves a full table. She stops tolerating half-hearted friendships because she now knows the value of her energy. She stops hiding her light to make others comfortable because she understands her light isn't a threat, it's a guide. When a woman is focused, she becomes magnetic. Not because she's trying to impress anyone, but because she radiates from within. She's not chasing love, money, status, or approval. She's attracting alignment. And that kind of woman, she can't be shaken. Because her value is no longer up for debate. She's already claimed it. Her focus becomes her fuel. Her solitude becomes her sanctuary. Her commitment to herself becomes the reason everything else in her life begins to fall into place. And the more she focuses, the more unstoppable she becomes. There is power in detachment. When a woman chooses to step back from the noise, the chaos, and the constant need to engage, she begins to experience a kind of clarity that can only come from stillness. Detachment does not mean she stops caring. It means she stops clinging. It means she no longer allows her worth to be tied to outcomes, people, or their opinions. She stops begging for closure, stops seeking validation, and stops explaining her boundaries. Instead, she leans into herself, into her truth, and into the freedom that comes with emotional independence. In the moments she chooses silence over reaction, she starts to see things for what they truly are. She notices the patterns she once ignored, the people she once gave too many chances to, the habits that kept her stuck in cycles of exhaustion. It becomes clear who was taking from her without ever giving, who only loved her when she was convenient, and who depended on her silence to keep their comfort intact. Detachment reveals the difference between connections that build and those that drain, and once her eyes open to that truth, she can't go back. This clarity doesn't come with noise, it comes in the quiet moments when she chooses herself. She no longer feels the need to fight for a seat at tables that were never built for her. She stops explaining her intuition to people who never listened. Her silence becomes her boundary, her focus becomes her compass, and her growth becomes non-negotiable. It's in this space that she begins to rebuild from the inside out. She no longer looks for peace in the presence of others. She finds it in the presence of God, in her breath, in her stillness, in her knowing. What once caused anxiety now feels distant. She realizes that detachment is not about becoming cold or bitter. It's about no longer tying her emotions to the unpredictable actions of others. It's about understanding that what's meant for her cannot be manipulated, and what is not meant for her cannot be forced. The weight she carried begins to lift. The stress that once consumed her begins to fade, and the freedom that follows is undeniable. People may say she's changed, and they'll be right. She's no longer available for drama, no longer reacting to everything, no longer invested in proving her worth. She's not running from life. She's just no longer chasing it in the wrong direction. Her peace becomes a filter. If it costs her that, it's too expensive. If it disturbs her clarity, it's not worth it. And if it pulls her away from her healing, it no longer has a place in her life. With detachment, she regains control. With clarity, she reclaims her direction. And in that silence, she finds the strength to walk away from anything that doesn't honor who she's becoming. Peace is not just a feeling, it is a frequency. When a woman gets in tune with herself, when she begins to prioritize her inner calm over external chaos, everything around her starts to shift. Her peace becomes magnetic. It draws in the right people, the right opportunities, and the right energy without her having to chase anything. A woman aligned with her peace doesn't beg for love, attention, or validation. She attracts it naturally and effortlessly because she radiates something that can't be faked: wholeness. When a woman chooses to protect her peace, she stops settling for what only looks good on the outside. She starts prioritizing what feels right on the inside. Her relationships change, not because she becomes distant, but because she becomes intentional. She no longer entertains drama, half effort, or emotional confusion. She's no longer impressed by loud personalities or temporary pleasures. What impresses her now is emotional safety, clear communication, and genuine connection. Because when a woman is at peace with herself, she can spot chaos from a mile away, and she's not afraid to walk away from it. She understands that being alone is not a punishment, it's a sacred space for alignment. Time alone becomes a gift, not a curse. In that solitude, she reconnects with her values, her dreams, her spiritual foundation. She hears her own voice again, the one that was once drowned out by noise, opinions, and pressure. And once she aligns with that voice, she no longer seeks approval outside of herself. Her peace becomes her compass. She doesn't move based on fear, but based on clarity. She doesn't act from urgency, but from intention. She is no longer moved by manipulation, flattery, or guilt, only by purpose. And the more aligned she becomes, the more life begins to mirror that alignment. She attracts people who respect her boundaries without needing reminders. She welcomes relationships rooted in mutual respect, not performance. She steps into environments that feed her spirit, not drain her soul. And she notices that the more she honors her peace, the less she tolerates anything that disturbs it. It's not arrogance, it's awareness. It's not coldness, it's clarity. She finally sees what she deserves, and now she refuses to settle for anything less. And this alignment doesn't mean life is perfect or painless, but it does mean she's no longer allowing chaos to dictate her pace. She moves slower, more intentionally. She speaks with conviction, not confusion, and she surrounds herself with people who don't just want access to her, but who are aligned with her growth, her energy, and her values. Peace becomes her lifestyle. And that peace sends a message without her having to say a word. It tells the world, I know who I am. I know what I carry, and I will not trade my peace for anyone or anything. Because when a woman is aligned with her peace, everything connected to her must align too. Healing doesn't always happen in loud moments. Sometimes the deepest healing begins when a woman stops talking, stops defending, and simply allows herself to be still. In that stillness, she starts to feel the emotion she buried, face the truths she avoided, and hear the voice she silenced for the sake of keeping the peace. Silence is not empty. It is full of wisdom, of reflection, of raw and honest transformation. It is in this quiet space that a woman finally meets the parts of herself she's been running from and the parts of herself she's been longing to reconnect with. When a woman is constantly explaining herself to others, she becomes exhausted. She spends so much energy justifying her boundaries, proving her worth, and trying to be understood. But there comes a moment when she realizes that real healing doesn't require anyone's approval. It doesn't need applause, and it doesn't come from being heard. It comes from listening to the wounds, listening to the still voice of God, listening to her heart and what it's been trying to say all along. That kind of listening only happens in silence. And in that silence, she begins to release what was never hers to carry in the first place. She stops apologizing for feeling deeply. She stops downplaying her experiences to make others comfortable. She allows herself to sit with the pain, not to stay in it, but to understand it, to break the cycle, and to rise above it. In that stillness, she realizes healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like getting up and choosing herself quietly. Sometimes it looks like walking away without explanation. Sometimes it's crying behind closed doors, writing out the truth she can't yet speak, and breathing through the moments she thought would break her. But they don't. They shape her. Healing in silence teaches her how to rely on her inner strength. It removes distractions. It cuts off the noise. It forces her to turn inward, where the real work happens. She begins to separate who she really is from what others projected onto her. She learns to validate herself, affirm herself, and love herself without needing the echo of someone else's voice. She realizes that the most powerful breakthroughs often come when no one's watching. No applause, no performance, just presence. And as she heals, her energy shifts. She becomes softer, but stronger, quieter, but more powerful. She no longer needs to prove that she's okay, because she actually is. Her silence is no longer filled with pain, it's filled with peace. She's not suppressing her emotions, she's honoring them. She's not avoiding people, she's protecting her spirit. She's not closing herself off, she's becoming whole. In silence she builds, in stillness she recovers, and through that process she emerges healed, restored, and anchored in who she was always meant to be. When a woman chooses herself, her peace, her growth, her stillness, she becomes unstoppable. By embracing silence, focusing inward, detaching from what no longer serves her, aligning with her truth, and allowing healing to unfold quietly, she transforms from the inside out. She stops reacting and starts rising. She no longer explains her worth, she embodies it. And through that quiet, intentional transformation, everything in her life begins to align. Because a woman who is in tune with herself doesn't have to force anything. She attracts what is meant for her simply by being who she was created to be. Thank you for giving yourself permission to grow, to pause, to heal, and to evolve. If no one's told you lately, you are powerful beyond measure. Keep choosing yourself with grace, with strength, and with courage. You don't need to be louder, you just need to be clearer. And you are. Keep rising in silence, because everything that's meant for you is already making its way. Good luck on your journey, and never forget, your silence is not empty, it's full of purpose.